This is Good Morning Mumbai, and you're with Hrishi K.
Radio 1.
I got to say this, somebody who's really made us proud, a stalwart in the Indian-American actor community, if I could call him that, Kal Penn, is in studio. Kal, welcome to the show and welcome to 94.3 Radio 1.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. And thanks for the compliment. Gosh.
No, really, we're very proud with all the work that you're doing, not just acting-wise, but even otherwise. I mean, the work you're doing with the administration, which we will come to eventually. I want to kick this off with the most cliched question in the world. How did Kalpen Modi become Kal Penn?
There's so many variations of this.
Yeah.
It's funny. So actually, when I was starting out as an actor, when I was in college, I was talking to some friends about screen names. There was some article I read about how 40%, 60%, something like that of actors have screen names, and I thought, oh, that's interesting. And it was one night, almost Harold and Kumar-esque. It was like 3 a.m. We were in college. We were just talking about some nonsense, and my friends were like, well, let's help you pick a screen name. I'm like, okay, let's do that. And then they started rattling off stuff like, what about Cal Pacino? What about, and just went on and on. Like, oh my God, make this stop. And anyway, eventually one of them said, well, what if you just split your first name? And I said, that's actually not a bad idea, because just like, Mohit becomes Mo and Joseph becomes Joe, Kalpen has become Cal every now and then when I was growing up. And so I tried it. I had just gotten new headshots done. I'd just gotten a new agent. So right around the same time, I was like, yeah, let's try a screen name, and ended up working out. I started, seeing a little uptick in auditions. I don't know if it was the name or the pictures or the agent or what, but once you work under a screen name, you better keep the name because you're going to keep working. So
It's remarkable how each one of your roles always manages to get some reaction. Like they say, there's got to be a reaction for an actor. If you don't get a reaction, that's a problem. So you have a DJ there on the other side of the glass, May. I said, Carl's coming in, and she goes, I love the Stoner movie.
Oh, nice.
And there are people who turn around and say, it's just so nuanced, the namesake performance. And on the very chair that you're sitting right now, Meera Nair has been there.
Oh, awesome.
And she's spoken such wonderful things about you.
Oh.
Meera and you, the connection has obviously got to be really strong. Talk about that.
Yeah, sure. Look, I love Meera, and she is one of the reasons that I became an actor to begin with. I remember when I was in 8th grade, Mississippi Masala came out. I went to go see it with my parents and my cousin, and it was the first time really that I had seen people who looked like me in an American movie, where it wasn't just about something stereotypical. And Denzel Washington, Sarita Chowdhury, and they both delivered this incredible performance. So when Meera was making The Namesake, I actually wrote, if you want the full connection, John Cho, who plays Harold in Harold and Kumar, introduced me to Jhumpa Lahiri's writing. I think he gave me a copy of Interpreter of Maladies when we were shooting the first Harold and Kumar, and I loved it. We read The Namesake together, tried to get the rights to The Namesake, and very quickly found out that Meera Nair had gotten the rights. John and I both breathed a sigh of relief, because we knew that we could never have done justice to her novel. And then I began this really aggressive campaign of trying to lobby Meera to let me audition for the project. And, I would call her office, and I would have my manager, agent, all these people call. No calls were returned. I finally just wrote her a letter. And I said, look, you have to let me audition for this movie. Just so you know, you're one of the reasons I'm an actor. The Namesake is one of my favorite books. Like, I know you're not supposed to write to a director and tell them what they're supposed to do. Like, I feel like I have nothing to lose because I'm not getting calls returned anyway, so I might as well write you this letter. And she called, and I went to New York to audition for her. One of the first things she said when I went into the audition was, I got your letter. It was beautiful. Thank you. It really touched me. But you should know that the biggest reason you're here is because my 13-year-old son Zoran is a huge Harold and Kumar fan. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? She said, no. He and his best friend Sam have been lobbying on your behalf for the better part of the last 4 months, saying, Mama, this Namesake movie, you have to audition Kal Penn. Then they showed me clips from Harold and Kumar, which only hurt your case, because I saw these clips and I was like, this guy is obviously not right to play Gogol in The Namesake. What are you talking about? But then I got your letter, and so here we are. And so I auditioned, and bottom line, I owe Zoran Mamdani, her son, a lot of credit on that. But no, Meera, it was my favorite project I've ever had the chance to work on was The Namesake.
And then your parents tell you that, playing a stoner is going to get you nowhere. Let's come to Bhopal. It's obviously 30 years to the tragedy, to the day when the movie releases on the 5th of December. And there are lots of undercurrents as far as the movie was concerned. Was it an immediate yes? Or was it a labored, I want to read this script, I want to talk to Ravi Kumar? How long did it take you to say yes?
It wasn't immediate. It was the latter. It was, wanting to make sure that I not just read the script, but really had the chance to understand Ravi's vision, sit down and talk to him about it. Obviously our film is a fictional adaptation of real life events, and because of that, at least in my opinion, you want to make sure that you do justice to the story in some way, at least in historical context. I also wanted to make sure that, if he was making a film that was about something so deep and so tragic that still affects people's lives today, that it was done in a tasteful way, and that it was done in a way that wasn't just one-sided. I feel like whenever we're telling stories like this, it's very easy, to focus on only one thing. And talking to Ravi about his passion for telling this story, I said, the script obviously was very powerful, but why do you want to tell this story? And he said it's a story that hasn't been told in this type of way. I feel passionate about it. I feel strongly that it needs to be told. I think it could have a global audience. And it's an issue that should be talked about. And I thought he did it in a really smart way. He didn't just talk about corporate greed, which is obviously something you should talk about, especially in cases like this. The movie touches on government corruption at the local and national level, which of course played a role in this aftermath of the tragedy itself. It touches on environmental law. It touches on industrialization, globalization. Not in a way that beats you over the head, but in a way that really helps you understand how something like this can happen. And when I got that sense from him, person to person, also aside from just reading the script, I thought, yeah, this is something that I want to be part of. It's a small movie. It had a very low budget. Who knows if it's going to get a big release, but I want to be part of something like this. And then, obviously selfishly also, playing a role like the one I do. I play an Indian Bhopali journalist in 1984. I've never had a role like that. The character is, starts out really loud, very big, very tabloidy, and you realize over the course of the movie that this is a guy who cares very deeply about the community that he's from. He starts trying to warn people about what's happening in this factory, and it falls on deaf ears because he's been this tabloid journalist for so long that nobody trusts him. And so that arc to me seemed really tragic. That here's a guy who's very happy-go-lucky in the first couple of scenes, and you realize as the movie plays out that there's a lot more depth there. So really, selfishly, as an acting challenge, I thought that was kind of interesting. So it was a lot of those factors together.
Indian American friends of mine, for example, they get their regional language right. I mean, I have Punjabi people of Punjabi origin who speak great Punjabi and they speak great English. But the Hindi is always a problem. Likewise for you, I imagine.
Gujarati barabache, but my Hindi is atrocious.
And I believe there was a bit of that in the movie.
Yeah, man. So here's the thing. The script Ravi emailed me before I met him, it was in English. When I met Ravi and we had our conversation was in English. When the final script was sent to me, that was in English, and all of my preparation the 2 months before I went to India, I prepped in LA and rehearsed on my own and did my own research and everything, and that was all in English. And then we get to Hyderabad where we shot the movie, and we sat down for the first read through, and it was myself, Ravi, and one of the assistant directors. We read through the first scene, and he and the assistant director kind of look at each other, and then they turn back to me, and Ravi, the director, goes, "Acha, abhi Hindi mein." I'm like, huh? What do you mean? He goes, Abhi Hindi mein. I'm like, I only speak Gujarati and English. What's with the Hindi? He's like, Cal, you're playing a Bhopali journalist in 1984. Of course he speaks Hindi. His first language is not English. It has to be authentic. I said, I don't speak Hindi. And so there was a more than a minute of panic on my part. But we hired a dialect coach and we hired a language coach, and it suddenly became this really awesome challenge that I wanted to tackle, where, at first the concern is just don't sound like an American speaking Hindi. You can't have an American accent speaking Hindi to pull it off. But that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg, and you really want to make sure that if there's a regional accent, regional dialect, that you're getting that right, that it should come second nature. But the learning curve was pretty steep. But even people like Rajpal Yadav, right? All the scenes I had with him, I remember a conversation with him where I looked really nervous, and he said, "Why are you nervous? Didn't you prepare?" And I said, "Of course, I've been preparing the last 2 months, but changing the language of a character is huge." And he said, "Well, I'll help you with the language. The point is you know who this character is. So don't look at it like you've completely lost sight of who this person is. All you're doing is replacing the language." That made me feel good, that I had done my job, but there was still a big learning curve with the language. So, I'm really curious to see actually what Indian audiences have to say about it. Some of the earlier screenings were in the US and UK, and so, you've got some NRIs watching it, giving you the thumbs up, but it's not quite the same thing as an Indian audience.
Martin Sheen himself has a very interesting name change story. Apparently, he had a Spanish-Irish kind of name.
Yeah.
And he changed that. Do you film a lot of scenes together? Do you get to hang out with the legend? And did he, share some stories?
So I was obviously and remain a huge Martin Sheen fan. I didn't have a lot of scenes with him. I think there were only one or two, and I don't know that we interact. That our characters actually interact, but I did get to spend a lot of time with him. We were in Hyderabad together, and I think for some of the Mumbai shoots as well. He's such a grounded guy, I think with regard to anything, but he was obviously passionate about the subject matter of the film. But when you're shooting, films here shoot differently. Just structurally, the shoots are different than they are in the States. So that takes some getting used to. It takes some getting used to, you're shooting in a crowd. It's actually a crowd. Just the nature of the business is very different. And I could see that, that also was a learning curve for me where I'm thinking, okay, how do I focus and how do I concentrate? And the confidence, Martin's done so many things in so many different environments. To learn from a guy like that, not to mention his awesome stories. I mean, I think he was saying he hadn't been to India since he had done Gandhi in the 80s. So that also says a lot, I think, about his faith in Ravi Kumar and doing a film like this after so long.
In the trailer, there's actually a scene of you getting into an auto with Misha Barton.
Yeah.
So what kind of a person is she? Is she laid back? Is she a party animal? Is she peaceful?
She's great. She, I and I think a lot of other people had only really known her from the OC. And she's great in that, but it's a totally different role. I mean, she's playing a French journalist who's trying to do a human interest story and then get sucked into this this environmental disaster piece. She was awesome, and I think I don't want to put words in her mouth, but from what I remember with our conversations, she liked the script and was really moved by the real world events and thought, this is the type of project that I want to do. I want to mix this up a little bit. I thought her performance was really deep. I thought she was really deep as a person, especially to juggle, projects that are a lot more mainstream or commercial, like the TV stuff that she's done, and then juxtapose that with something, much deeper for her as an actor was really cool.
You were in the TV show House, and a lot of people were really hooked on to your character, and all of a sudden, the character's bumped off.
Yeah.
Was it because you got yourself a job at the Obama administration?
It was. So I had, I had started volunteering for the president back in 2007. I, was inspired, remain inspired by him, and
why so? Is it the Democrats and what they stand for, or him himself?
No, it's him himself. I'm an independent actually, so I've voted for both Democrats and Republicans depending on the election and the candidate and all that. But I think it was his background. I had in 2007. I'd still had friends that couldn't afford college, and I had plenty of friends who didn't have health insurance. Cost of education was very high. Obviously, all the wars that were going on, and I kind of thought, we've had Bushes and Clintons the last 20 years in the U.S. These two big dynasties, and certainly very talented families, but neither family had really changed a whole lot for people that I knew. And then here comes a candidate who was very different in terms of his background, in terms of his experience. Constitutional law professor and community organizer without any ties to major politics, and that was really refreshing. I think a lot of people wanted to volunteer and help out. I think the unexpected part of that was seeing, when I joined his campaign, he was down 40 points in the polls. In the United States, we have a really long primary process, and as the primary process continued, he started picking up more and more support. And when he ended up winning the White House, there was an opportunity to serve in the White House doing essentially the similar type of outreach that I was doing on his campaign. So working on issues related to young people, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. And it's sort of like, what do you say no? I mean, you don't say no if somebody's asking you to serve your country. You can't really say like, yeah, I gotta go make another stoner movie. I'm gonna pass on this, right? So I thought, I want to take a sabbatical. I want to do it for either a year or two. Acting is always my first love, and it's not like I'm giving up acting to go do this. And I also knew and still know I don't want a long-term career in politics or anything. So I went to David Shore, the guy who created House. I told him the situation. I said, I got this opportunity to serve at the White House, and I'm very happy on House. This is not me coming to you saying I have some beef with somebody or I want to get off the show. This is an incredible job. Not to mention all the Indians in my life are happy that if I'm not a doctor, I'm at least playing one. So he said, so you want to be written off the show? And I said, well, I just want to know what you think. He said, look, I'm a screenwriter, but I was a lawyer. And David was a lawyer from Canada. And he said, everybody told me that I was crazy saying that I wanted to move to LA to be a screenwriter. So who am I to tell you that you're crazy for saying you want to take a year or two off and go work at the White House? I mean, I assume everybody's telling you you're crazy. And I said, yeah, of course. He said, "We'll work it out. I'll let you know how we're going to do it." And then a couple days later, he actually called me into his office and he said, "Okay, Kuttner's going to kill himself in 2 episodes." Like, whoa, whoa, whoa! I don't start at the White House for another 6 months. We can work something out. But it turned out plot wise, I think they wanted a catalyst for House to really have some mental challenges. It's one of the very few mysteries that he can't actually solve. Nobody knows why Kuttner took his own life. They wanted that to be kind of realistic. That unfortunately, when things like this happen in real life, oftentimes there's no note left. There are no signs. It also was clear. I'm like, okay, so when I'm done with my 2 years in the White House, there's no coming back to this hospital, right? But he was great about it, and I'm actually working with him again now on a show called Battle Creek. He and Vince Gilligan, who created Breaking Bad, partnered up for this show. It's about cops in Michigan, so I'm playing a detective. I carry a gun and tackle bad guys, and so again, a very different type of a role for me. But David's fantastic. I was really thankful that he let me go and have that opportunity, and it's 2 years that I'll never forget. And the other thing I'll say, because I get this question a lot, particularly here, is I know it sounds like a rarity. Why would you go and do something like that in politics, especially if you don't want a career in politics? It's not that uncommon, I think, in the U.S. There's this whole, there are plenty of people who are doctors or policy experts, professors, lawyers that take a year, or 4 years, or 6 years off and go work for a candidate or somebody that they believe in, and then when that's done, they go back to their private sector career. I think because I'm an actor, it got a little more undue attention just because I'm in the public eye, but it's not leaving a job temporarily and then coming back to your career to serve your country is not actually as rare as I think it sounds. And that's kind of a cool thing, to have the chance to, a lot of my colleagues at the White House were taking time off from being CEOs or being, law students or what have you. So it was an interesting time, and I think it remains an interesting time, but also happy to be back doing movies,
But actors normally in India don't turn around and say, I hounded a director to get a role. You've already done that in this interview, which is quite charming for a lot of people who I'm sure who are listening. And the second thing you've done is you've actually said you went and did that without the insecurity of saying, wow, am I losing this role? Do I regret it? Was there a phase ever when that happened saying, I'm going to go back in 2 years, will I have the kind of roles that I have now?
Yeah, and I think, look, when, with any, I assume Bollywood was the same way, perhaps even more so, but when you take a sabbatical for a year or especially 2 years, you know that you're not going to come back to the same type of career that you had, right? So you kind of make that calculation. You say, if my career is on a particular trajectory, knock on wood, and I'm able to sustain myself, even, something as simple as being able to pay your rent doing something you love, which is rare, why give that up? And I did have some serious conversations with my manager and agent and the people that you hire to help you with your career, and they all said, look, you should know that when you come back, you'll be coming back to a different playing field. And I said, okay, I get that. And I have no regrets. I mean, certainly I think it was a question of, in terms of life experience, will I look back and say that I felt passionately about doing something and that I did it, or that, I campaigned for a guy and told other people what to do, and then when I was asked to step up to the plate, I said, nah, let somebody else do it. I mean, I was like, I don't want to be that guy that says, hey, you guys should all vote for this person, but I'm not going to go ahead and actually step up to the plate. So I thought, to me, it was a no-brainer, and it was an honor to serve your country and work in the White House. So I did that, and look, I have to say, honestly, career trajectory is one thing, but being able to come back to what you love to do and have fans that are willing to watch you and support you. I mean, when my 2 years was up at the White House, the first job I got back in Hollywood was on How I Met Your Mother. The fans of both How I Met Your Mother and the Harold and Kumar series and some of the other stuff were so supportive. And I had no idea. That was unexpected. I mean, I was really excited to go work with Neil again, and I had worked with Allison Hannigan on Buffy the Vampire Slayer years ago, and so I thought, what a cool show to be part of. But then when the episodes started airing and seeing all this love from the fans, I was kind of taken aback. I'm like, I love you guys. The fact that you'll let me go off and do something that has nothing to do with acting, and then B, that I'm blessed enough to come back to a career that I love and people will still watch. I remain, indebted and thankful to the fans for that.
And there is a Harold and Kumar animation. Is it a TV series? And you're giving your voice to that? That must have been reliving it in a whole new dimension.
Yeah, it was cool. Actually, it's funny. There have been conversations about, should this be a TV show? We realized the only way that could actually work is if it was animated, because you can get away with things that you otherwise can't get away with on American television. I mean, these movies are so R-rated. Whenever they air on Comedy Central and cable channels in the States, all the good stuff is edited out, right? And you always hear about it on your Twitter feed, like, man, Harold and Kumar's on Comedy Central. I don't understand. The movie's like 10 minutes long. They cut out everything else. And we realized for TV, it's got to be kind of the same thing. So animation allows you a lot more liberty. Yep. We shot the pilot, or they're animating the pilot right now. We do the voices of the characters. And I I think we're going to find out in the next couple of months if they turn the pilot episode into a full series.
And working with Kiefer Sutherland on 24, that's another big series here in
Yeah.
India. You know, people buy DVDs, watch it all the
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
relive it all the time. That must have been a wonderful journey.
It was awesome. I was a huge fan of the show before. I loved the character. I mean, I was playing a terrorist on 24, and I love, as I said before, I love playing characters that are so completely different from me. I guess playing a terrorist is about as different as you can get from anybody. So taking on that challenge was awesome, and then just the fact that it was 24. I mean, I remember showing up every day, insanely excited that I was on 24. And there's one scene at there's a scene at the end before my character gets shot, where I pull out a gun, a couple of cops pull out guns, and Kiefer pulls out a gun, and he says, "Drop your weapon." And no matter how many takes of it we did, I remember, I'm in character, I'm pulling out my gun. As soon as Kiefer yells, "Drop your weapon," all I could think of is, "Holy shit, man, you're on 24." And it was just, it like takes you out of that moment. And it was like, it was an embarrassment because as an actor, you want to stay in character. You want to continue, so, but that was awesome. I wish I was on for longer because it was an awesome experience.
Mr. Kapoor, Anil Kapoor was on the show, says that, Kiefer is tough to keep up with, such a fun guy, took Mr. Kapoor out pubbing and partying and things like that. Did you get to hang out post the day's shoot? Yeah.
He is an incredibly intense performer. So all of the episodes that I had were all work, and it was really cool to see a guy who has a balanced life like that. Like, he would show up to work early, always ready to rehearse, always ready to go. Most of the scenes I had actually weren't with him. I think there were only 2 towards the end. So I didn't get to know him as well as I think Mr. Kapoor had. Most of my scenes were with the family that I took hostage, which was insane because it's something that, I mean, I'm scared of guns and I'm scared of hostage situations. So being in that situation was awesome. But no, everybody on the crew. I mean, a lot of the guys who are on Battle Creek with us right now were on the 24 crew. I have never met a person that doesn't have an awesome story about Kiefer.
All the ladies who are listening to this broadcast would want to know if you have a partner or your Gujarati parents trying to set you up with a nice Gujarati girl.
So I think, thankfully, here's the deal. When you, at 17, when you tell your parents that you're going to be an actor, and then when you actually go through with not being a doctor, all the other stuff gets to slide. So all, like, the pressure of, beta, just go on shadi.com, all that stuff, like, tends to go out the window. And my parents are actually very very progressive in that regard, and they know, like, this is going to sound like such a cliche answer, but every actor that I know, whether it's work schedules or whether it's a passion project or what have you, of course you have your personal life and you do your thing, but it's sort of like, you come to a point in your life where you realize you're married to your work, or you're not married to your work, right? Actors, like right now, I've been working for the last 6 months on this TV show. I know that I'm going to be unemployed come December because our show's going to end. And then from December to June, what do you do? So that leaves a lot more room for family, personal life, of course, finding new projects. But I feel like I'm still learning that balance of doing that dance, of going back to Kiefer. I think he did this really well, right? Here's a guy who has a great personal life, shows up to work, ready to work, and then goes home and actually does a great job. It's something I'm learning now, especially because, being 24, shooting Harold and Kumar, very different lifestyle. You don't, when you're done with work, you can grab a couple of beers. There's nothing else on your mind. You've paid your rent and now so as you grow older, I think it's an interesting dance to do, and something I learn a lot about from older actors.
Let's come back to Bhopal. The Union Carbide chairman, or the head, is played by Martin Sheen. You are apparently modeled on a local journalist called Keswani. Ever met him, or did you read up about him?
Yeah, I read up about Keswani. I have not met him, and one of the reasons was because when we started prep for the film, I asked our director, Ravi Kumar, I said, how closely is this based on this real guy? And, can I fly to Bhopal, really, like, take him out to lunch every day for 2 weeks and get to know him? And he said no. And the reason the reason I don't want you to is in terms of the fictional adaptation, there's a lot more fiction in our interpretation of this guy Motwani, which is probably one of the reasons why the name is even. And I think what Ravi wanted, and I was very flattered to hear this, he said, he wanted somebody to play this character who could be funny and who would offer some levity to an otherwise pretty serious film, but then also flip that around and develop that character over the arc of the film. He said that one of the ways to do that is by taking these creative liberties, right? This guy Keswani, while he lived through the disaster and did try to warn people, my understanding is he's not, I wear these insanely loud shirts and I'm really arrogant during parts of the film, and just liberties that you take when you're not actually mirroring a person. So I would love to meet him now that we're done with the film. I also feel sort of safe that I know it's not, it's like loosely based on or inspired by this guy, but it's not supposed to be this guy. So I am absolved of the pressure that other people have when they're actually playing humans.
Well, the social thriller releases on the 5th of December, all you who listen. And obviously, as an actor, you can't be untouched by the fact that it is based, even if it is loosely, on a massive human tragedy. And constantly over the passage of time, malpractices in corporate life have come to the fore, you know. You think we're getting more responsible as human beings on this planet to things like this, to things like Bhopal? When you were working in this movie, it must have really touched a chord somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to sort of the first question, where of course a movie like this touches a chord, and you think of, we all get angry when we hear about things like this happening around the world, and I feel like that anger a lot of times forces us to not look at the complete picture. And I also feel like if, the more this kind of stuff happens, the more that we're sort of culpable in some respect, if it's happening in our own backyard or if it's happening to a company with whom we do business. The most recent example that got national media attention was the BP oil spill in the Gulf, and the way BP handled that was horrible, of course. So I think, you realize, particularly with something like Bhopal, the tens of thousands of people who lost their lives, that you do hope that a movie like this can spark a conversation. If for any other reason, biggest thing, obviously, from what I understand from talking to some of the survivors groups that have reached out to us with the film is, the plant hasn't even been cleaned up. And the types of corruption that existed and the types of corporate greed that existed, the way that, governments blamed the company blamed the government, and who are the ones who are suffering are really the people who live there. It's the kind of thing that, of course, affects you when you think about it. One of the silver linings, I think, if there can be such a thing in a story like this, I thought everybody knew how this movie ends, because I thought that everyone knows about the disaster. I was wrong. We screened the movie in New York recently, and I think the vast majority of our American audience had no idea that the Bhopal tragedy happened. And I overheard people when we were coming out of the theater saying, talking to each other, they were very angry that they had no idea that this had actually happened. There were other conversations, people saying, how can something like this happen? How do we prevent something like this from happening again? And I thought, as an actor, you never, I think, tackle a project specifically for that reason. But if the byproduct of a movie of this type is to spark conversations from people who want to make sure that history doesn't repeat itself, it's a beautiful thing. It's a great, one of the great byproducts of art.
Last couple of questions. How is Diwali celebrated in the Modi household?
A lot of family, a lot of food. Same as here.
What's your favorite dish? What do you like to eat? When you're working, otherwise, yeah?
I mean, anything my mom makes. My favorite food is tacos, but in terms of Indian food, I mean, I will eat everything. And Indo-Chinese is also one of my favorites. So I'm trying to actually look up the airline rules and how much I can bring back with me on the plane. How much of it'll go bad before I reach the States.
What's the last holiday you took and said, wow, this is paradise, a travel destination that you couldn't get enough of? Yeah?
Ooh, this is going to sound so cliche. We shoot Battle Creek not in Michigan, but south of Los Angeles in a little town called Manhattan Beach. There's one studio in Manhattan Beach. It's about an hour and a half south of proper LA. I can't really talk about how bad traffic is there because we're sitting in a studio in Mumbai right now, and it's obviously much more of an issue here. But it's a beach town, and I had never been there, even though I had lived in LA for 10 years. We're shooting the show, and sometimes you'll have a break for 2 or 3 hours, and it's a mile from the ocean. And first time I drove to the ocean, I'm thinking, wait, this is seriously a mile from the studio? Days go by and you're like, I'm actually going to go to work early because I want to go boogie. I'm going to go in the water for an hour before I have to go to work. And then the next thing we only did a half a season. We did 13 episodes, and we're waiting to see if we get a full year. I think if we get a full year, I might have to move down there. I mean, it's not a destination as in, I had to fly somewhere and stay for a week. This is literally a mile from where I work. It's embarrassing to know that it's just a mile away, but it really calms me down. It's such a beautiful place, and I love being on the water. So I would have to say, Manhattan Beach.
Last question: what music are you listening to? And pick a great song or a band that you're into.
Oh man, there's a lot. I'm a big music fan. So I would say, there's a guy named Sam Hunt right now in the States. He's a country artist. I like hip hop and I like country, and I think they're actually very similar in terms of what the songs talk about. They're both incredibly lyrical and incredibly poetic. So Sam Hunt is great. I really like I like Talib Kweli. I like Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. I mean, a lot of his stuff. I was just talking to Rajpal about this. I downloaded the D-Day version of Mast Kalender,
Yep.
which he crushes in the first 10 minutes of that film. So I think if you looked at my phone's not synced since I don't have access here, but if you looked at my phone, it's probably a fair balance of Hindi songs, Garba, which is fantastic on cardio days at the gym, and hip hop, country, and pop songs.
Magic. Kal Penn, full power to you and best of luck for the 5th of December and for Bhopal and all your other projects. Best of luck and we hope to see you back soon.
Thanks, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.